Listen closely, because what you're about to hear is not being presented as fact. It's what reports, whispers, and explosive commentary online are claiming right now, and fans are completely shaken by it. According to growing chatter across entertainment blogs and insider commentary pages, something big may have happened behind the scenes between Jay-Z and Kanye West. Something so tense, so calculated, that people are calling it a secret ultimatum that changed their entire relationship forever. For years, the public saw brotherhood, success, and unity, chart-topping albums, sold-out tours, legendary moments that shaped hip-hop history. But now, commentators are asking a chilling question. What if that brotherhood was never as solid as it looked? What if loyalty came with conditions? And what if one man finally refused to play by those rules? Fans are shocked because recent commentary suggests that just before everything fell apart, Jay-Z may have drawn a line. Not publicly, not on a record, but privately. Insiders aren't saying it happened. They're saying reports claim it did. And if those reports are even partially true, then the entire story of Jay and Kanye needs to be re-examined from the ground up. Emotions ran high as fans revisited old interviews, lyrics, and moments that once seemed harmless. Lines that felt inspirational now sound loaded. Silences that once felt respectful now feel strategic. And moments of distance suddenly look like warning signs no one wanted to see. Some say Kanye believed he was standing beside a brother. Others claim Jay was standing above a business partner. And now, online commentators are suggesting that when Kanye stopped listening, stopped adjusting, stopped playing the role expected of him, everything changed. The internet is buzzing, comment sections are on fire, and fans are split right down the middle. Was this a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by speculation? Or was this the quiet power move that finally pushed one of hip-hop's most iconic partnerships past the point of no return? Because if the reports are true, and that's a big if, this wasn't just a fallout, it was a warning, and it may explain everything that came after. The story being discussed in online commentary does not begin with betrayal. It begins with admiration, opportunity, and a power balance that quietly leaned in one direction from the very start. According to entertainment reports and long-form breakdowns circulating now, the relationship between Jay and Kanye was never just about music. It was about access, hierarchy, and who was allowed to grow without permission. When Kanye first entered that world, commentators say he came in hungry, emotional, and eager to prove himself. He wasn't just producing beats, he was absorbing everything around him. The rooms, the conversations, the rules that weren't written down, but were clearly understood by everyone who survived in that space. People close to the situation have claimed that Kanye believed he had finally found mentors who saw his vision, but others now argue that what he really found was a system that expected obedience before respect. Reports suggest that early on, Jay positioned himself as the calm authority figure. Not loud, not controlling on the surface, just present, watching, guiding when necessary, stepping back when it benefited him. To the public, it looked like brotherhood. Behind closed doors, commentators claim it felt more like supervision. Kanye was praised when he stayed in his lane, when he delivered hits, when he enhanced the brand. But when he spoke out of turn, pushed ideas too far, or demanded more space, the temperature reportedly shifted. Fans revisiting old footage say you can see it now. Moments where Kanye is talking passionately, pacing, hands moving, energy spilling out. And moments where Jay is still, composed, listening but not engaging emotionally. Some interpret that as wisdom. Others now see it as distance. And that difference in interpretation is what fuels the current wave of speculation. As the years went on and success piled up, reports claim Kanye's confidence grew faster than his willingness to be managed. He wasn't just a producer anymore. He wasn't just the creative engine. He was becoming a voice, a brand, someone who wanted to speak on culture, power, and identity without clearing it first. And according to commentators, that shift made people uncomfortable. There are claims that subtle conversations began happening, not arguments, not threats, just reminders. Reminders of how the industry works. Reminders of who opens doors and who closes them. Reminders of what happens when you protect the system versus when you challenge it. People close to the narrative say Kanye heard those reminders but didn't absorb them the way others did. He took them personally, emotionally, as limitations rather than guidance. Fans are shocked because this is where the tone reportedly changed. Commentary
suggests that praise became conditional, support became selective, and silence became more common than encouragement. Kanye, according to these reports, started feeling like every move he made was being measured against an unspoken standard. Stay aligned, stay protected. Drift too far, stand alone. Those who analyze body language in old interviews say the tension was already there long before the public fallout. Jokes that didn't land, pauses that lingered too long, moments where laughter felt forced. And when Kanye began expressing frustration publicly about not being fully accepted or understood, some claim that was the first crack others noticed. People who followed the story closely say Kanye didn't see himself as rebellious, he saw himself as honest. But honesty in that environment often comes with consequences. Reports now suggest that behind the scenes, there were conversations framed as concern but felt like correction, advice that sounded supportive but carried warnings underneath. And while nothing explicit was ever confirmed, the pattern itself is what has people talking now. Fans are especially focused on moments where Kanye appeared hurt rather than angry, interviews where his voice softened, statements where he talked about family more than business. Those moments, commentators argue, show someone who believed loyalty should be mutual, not transactional. And when that expectation wasn't met, disappointment turned into suspicion. According to ongoing discussions online, Kanye started questioning whether the support he received was genuine or strategic, whether favors came with invisible strings, whether success was celebrated or tolerated. And that internal conflict, people say, marked the beginning of a shift that would eventually spill into public view. By the time their collaboration reached its peak, reports claimed the emotional distance was already there. What looked like unity on stage masked unresolved tension off it. Kanye felt he had earned freedom. Others felt he was forgetting the structure that allowed him to rise. And that difference in perspective is what many believe set the stage for everything that followed. As fans piece together these moments now, the story feels less like a sudden fallout and more like a slow unraveling, not caused by one argument, but by years of unspoken expectations colliding with an artist who refused to stay small. And according to the commentary gaining traction, that refusal may have been the moment everything quietly changed. The discussion circulating right now across entertainment commentary channels paints a picture that feels less like a sudden betrayal and more like a slow-burning imbalance that had been building for years. According to reports being talked about, the foundation of the relationship between Jay-Z and Kanye West was never as equal as fans believed. From the outside, it looked like mentorship turning into brotherhood. From the inside, commentators now claim it may have felt more like guidance turning into quiet authority. Early on, Kanye was described by people close to the scene as intensely passionate and deeply emotional. He didn't just want success, he wanted validation. Not applause, but acceptance. Those early studio sessions weren't just about beats and bars, they were about belonging. Kanye reportedly believed that being invited into Jay's world meant he was finally being seen as more than just a background player. Fans remember those moments as the birth of something legendary, but current commentary suggests the power dynamic was already set. Jay, according to long-running industry talk, moved differently. Calm, strategic, rarely reactive. He had already mastered the system Kanye was still trying to understand. And while that experience was valuable, some now argue it also created an invisible hierarchy. Kanye looked up, Jay looked ahead. And that difference matters when expectations start to shift. As Kanye's influence grew, so did his confidence. Commentary points out that he wasn't content with staying in a single role. He wanted to speak on fashion, culture, business, and power. To him, that expansion felt natural. To others, it reportedly felt disruptive. Insiders quoted in recent breakdowns suggest there were moments when enthusiasm was met with silence rather than encouragement. Moments where ideas were acknowledged but not embraced. Fans revisiting old interviews say you can hear it in Kanye's voice when he talks about those years. There's pride, but there's also frustration. Moments where he hints at feeling underestimated or misunderstood. Commentators believe that frustration didn't come from the public. It came from private spaces where Kanye expected affirmation and instead felt resistance. Reports circulating now describe a pattern. Praise when Kanye delivered value. Distance when he demanded autonomy. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, just subtle shifts in energy. And those shifts, according to people, analyzing the situation can be more damaging than open conflict because they leave room for doubt to grow. Kanye, by many accounts, took those changes personally, not as business decisions, but as emotional ones. He began questioning whether loyalty was conditional, whether support depended on silence, whether success was welcome only if it stayed within approved boundaries. Fans are shocked because this reframes moments that once felt random into something more intentional. Commentary suggests there were conversations framed as concern, advice that sounded protective on the surface, but carried clear expectations underneath. Stay focused, stay aligned, don't rock the boat. For some, that kind of guidance feels normal. For someone like Kanye, who has always tied creativity to freedom, it reportedly felt suffocating. People close to the narrative claim Kanye didn't rebel immediately. He tried to adapt. He tried to balance gratitude with self-expression. But as his platform grew, so did his need to speak openly. And every time he pushed outward, the space around him allegedly tightened instead of expanded. Fans analyzing footage from that era point out moments where Kanye appears energized but isolated, laughing loudly while others remain reserved, sharing big visions while receiving measured responses. Those contrasts are fueling today's speculation that the emotional distance wasn't imagined, it was felt, even if it was never acknowledged publicly. According to current discussions, this is where resentment quietly formed. Not because of one disagreement, but because of repeated moments where Kanye felt he was being managed rather than trusted, where his growth was monitored instead of celebrated. And while Jay's silence has often been interpreted as wisdom, some fans now see it as detachment. The reports don't claim that anyone acted with malice. Instead, they suggest a clash of identities. One man built his power by understanding the system and moving within it. The other believed true influence meant challenging the system openly. Those philosophies can coexist for a time, but when success magnifies them, they often collide. As these interpretations gain traction, fans are rethinking everything they thought they knew. What once looked like mutual respect now looks like uneven investment. What once felt like brotherhood now feels complicated by control and expectation. And according to the commentary spreading now, this emotional disconnect laid the groundwork for decisions that would later shock the world. By the time cracks became visible to the public, the internal tension had already done its work. Kanye no longer felt guided, he felt constrained. And Jay, according to those discussing the situation, may have felt his influence slipping, not because of disloyalty, but because Kanye was becoming someone who no longer needed permission to speak. That quiet realization, fans believe, is where everything truly shifted. Not in a fight, not in a headline, but in a growing awareness that the relationship had changed in ways neither of them could reverse without confronting the imbalance head-on. As the speculation continues, commentators say the next phase of the story is where emotions quietly turned into pressure. According to reports being discussed online, this was the period when Kanye stopped feeling like a rising star and started feeling like a variable that needed managing. People analyzing the situation say the shift wasn't announced, it was felt. Meetings felt shorter, conversations felt more careful, and the freedom Kanye once believed he had started to feel conditional. Around this time, commentary suggests Kanye began questioning intentions more openly, though not always directly. He would speak in interviews about feeling boxed in, about not being taken seriously outside of music, about people smiling in his face but doubting him behind closed doors. Fans didn't connect those dots back then, but now many believe those statements were less about the industry in general and more about his immediate circle. Jay, on the other hand, remained publicly composed. According to people who follow industry behavior closely, his silence became louder than any response. He didn't correct narratives, he didn't escalate tension, he simply didn't engage. And for someone like Kanye, who processes relationships emotionally rather than strategically, that absence reportedly felt like rejection. Commentators say this is when the idea of control started entering the conversation, not in the form of commands, but in expectations. Expectations about public behavior, expectations about what should be said and what should be left unsaid, expectations about protecting brands, alliances, and optics. None of this is confirmed as fact, but fans are shocked by how consistently these themes appear across multiple reports and breakdowns. There are claims that Kanye felt pulled in two directions. On one side, gratitude for
opportunities he knew mattered. On the other, a growing sense that expressing himself freely came with consequences. People close to the narrative say he struggled with that tension internally, often expressing confusion rather than anger. Confusion about why honesty felt dangerous. Confusion about why speaking his mind seemed to cost him support. As this tension grew, so did the emotional distance. Commentators point out that even during collaborative successes, something felt off. Body language, tone, energy. Moments where celebration felt muted. Fans now say those moments read differently in hindsight. What once looked like maturity now feels like disengagement. Reports suggest that private disagreements began surfacing more often. Not explosive arguments, but firm differences in vision. Kanye reportedly pushed for bold moves, public statements, and creative risks. Jay, according to commentary, favored restraint, long games, and controlled narratives. Neither approach is wrong on its own, but together they created friction that couldn't be ignored. Fans are especially focused on how Kanye responded to that friction. Instead of pulling back, he leaned forward. He spoke more, he challenged more. He demanded recognition not just for his work, but for his voice. And commentators believe that insistence may have been perceived as a threat to balance rather than a sign of growth. There are claims circulating that this was the point where subtle warnings entered the picture. Not ultimatums, but reminders. Reminders of how quickly support can disappear. Reminders of how fragile public favor can be. Reminders of who controls access to certain spaces. None of this is presented as confirmed truth, but the consistency of these claims has fans questioning long-held assumptions. Kanye, according to those discussing the story, didn't respond well to that kind of pressure. Instead of complying quietly, he internalized it and grew resentful. He began to see guidance as limitation and protection as control. And once that perception took hold, every interaction was filtered through suspicion. Commentators say this is when Kanye started pulling away emotionally, even before any public fallout occurred. He still showed up, he still performed, but the trust that once grounded the relationship was weakening. He no longer felt seen as an equal, he felt evaluated. Fans revisiting interviews from this period point to moments where Kanye speaks about loyalty with visible emotion, moments where his voice cracks slightly when discussing friendship. Those moments now feel less random and more revealing. Commentators argue they show someone grappling with disappointment rather than ego. Jay's perspective, as interpreted by analysts, appears very different. He had built his legacy by surviving systems, not challenging them head-on. From that view, Kanye's unpredictability may have felt dangerous, not personally, but structurally. And when stability is your currency, unpredictability becomes a liability. This difference in worldview is what many believe pushed the relationship into a quiet standoff. Kanye wanted affirmation without conditions. Jay wanted alignment without chaos. Neither side reportedly felt fully understood. And without open resolution, assumptions filled the gap. Fans are shocked because the reports suggest this wasn't about money or fame. It was about autonomy, about who gets to speak freely and who is expected to move carefully, about whether success buys you independence or deeper oversight. As the distance grew, so did the speculation. People began noticing missed appearances, colder interactions, and less collaboration. At the time, it was brushed off as busy schedules. Now, commentators say it was something deeper, a relationship adjusting to the realization that its foundation was no longer shared. According to the narrative gaining traction, this period marked the emotional turning point, the moment where guidance began feeling like control, where loyalty began feeling one-sided, and where Kanye, whether consciously or not, started preparing himself to stand alone rather than stay constrained. By the end of this phase, fans believe the bond that once felt unbreakable had become fragile, not shattered but strained, held together by history rather than trust. And as the pressure continued to build, it became clear to those watching closely that something had to give. As the tension deepened, commentary suggests the situation moved from quiet discomfort into something far more serious. This is the phase where fans believe the emotional cracks finally reached a point where they could no longer be hidden behind success or history. According to reports being discussed, Kanye began to feel like every move he made was being watched through a lens of risk rather than respect. People close to the narrative say Kanye started interpreting silence as judgment. When he spoke and received no response, he didn't hear patience.
He heard disapproval, and when advice came, it no longer felt optional. It felt like a boundary. Commentators argue that this is where the idea of an unspoken ultimatum started forming in Kanye's mind, not because anyone clearly stated it, but because the environment around him changed. Fans are shocked by how many moments from this era suddenly feel different in hindsight. Award shows where energy felt cold, public events where distance was visible but unexplained, interviews where Kanye appeared defensive even when no one was attacking him. According to online breakdowns, these weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a growing internal battle. Reports claim Kanye felt cornered between being grateful and being honest. He reportedly believed that if he stayed quiet, he could keep the peace. But if he spoke freely, he risked losing protection. That internal conflict, commentators say, began spilling out in subtle ways. Tone shifts, unpredictable statements, moments of raw emotion that confused fans at the time. There are claims that behind closed doors, conversations became tense, not loud, not aggressive, but firm. Kanye reportedly pushed back on expectations, questioning why his success didn't come with trust, why his vision needed approval, why his loyalty felt assumed rather than returned. Those discussions, according to speculation, were uncomfortable because they challenged roles that had never been openly defined. Fans who follow body language closely point to moments where Kanye looks visibly frustrated while others remain composed. Commentators interpret that contrast as more than personality difference. They see it as power imbalance playing out in real time. One person emotionally invested, the other strategically distant. This is also the period where Kanye's public image began to shift dramatically. Commentators argue that his unpredictability wasn't random. It was the result of pressure meeting resistance. Instead of shrinking, Kanye expanded. He spoke louder. He took bigger risks. He refused to soften his edges.
And for people who value control and stability, that behavior can feel threatening. According to reports circulating now, this escalation may have triggered what fans describe as the final breaking point, not a fight, but a realization. The realization that Kanye could no longer be guided quietly, that his voice was too loud, his reach too wide, and his independence too strong to manage without confrontation. Fans believe this is when the emotional distance turned into strategic separation. Missed calls, delayed responses, fewer shared spaces, not because of anger, but because alignment was slipping away. Commentators say Kanye noticed this withdrawal and took it deeply personally. To him, distance wasn't neutral, it was abandonment. There are claims that this is when Kanye began openly questioning motives, wondering whether past support was genuine or calculated, whether opportunities were gifts or investments, whether friendship existed only as long as he remained predictable. These questions reportedly weighed heavily on him and influenced how he interpreted every interaction afterward. Commentary suggests that the so-called ultimatum wasn't delivered in words, but in behavior. Stay within the lines or face the consequences of standing alone. And whether that message was intentional or not, fans believe Kanye felt it clearly. His response was not submission, but defiance. This defiance, analysts argue, is what changed everything. Kanye stopped seeking approval. He stopped adjusting his tone. He stopped filtering his thoughts to protect comfort. Instead, he chose exposure over safety, honesty over alignment, and in doing so, he crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Fans are divided on this phase. Some believe Kanye sabotaged himself by refusing guidance. Others believe he was reclaiming agency that had been slowly taken from him. Either way, commentators agree this was the moment the relationship could no longer function as it once had. Reports suggest that trust had eroded on both sides. Kanye felt managed. The other side reportedly felt destabilized. Without trust, every action became suspect. Every silence became loaded. And every public move carried weight far beyond its surface meaning. This is also when fans began noticing the narrative shift around Kanye in the broader industry. Support cooled. Patience wore thin. Tolerance turned into distance. Commentators argue that while this shift appeared sudden to the public, it was the result of long-standing tension finally reaching its limit. According to the story being pieced together now, this phase marked the emotional point of no return, not because bridges were burned, but both sides stopped trying to cross them. Kanye moved forward without reassurance. Others stepped back without explanation. And once that separation solidified, the stage was set for everything that followed: public fallout.
Controversial statements, industry backlash, and a fan base left trying to understand how one of the most powerful partnerships in music history unraveled without ever truly exploding. As the separation became more visible, commentators say the final stage of this story unfolded in a way that stunned fans and reshaped how the entire relationship was viewed. According to reports circulating online, this was the period where silence fully replaced communication. Not just less interaction, but none that the public could see. And in that silence, speculation grew louder than ever. Fans noticed that moments which once would have included public support suddenly passed without acknowledgement. Big events came and went, controversies erupted, careers shifted, and yet the absence remained. Commentators argue that this absence wasn't accidental, it felt deliberate, as if distance itself had become the message. Kanye, according to people discussing the narrative, appeared increasingly isolated during this time. His public statements grew more emotional, more defensive, and more raw. Fans who had followed him for years say there was a noticeable shift in how he spoke about trust and loyalty. He no longer sounded disappointed, he sounded resolved, like someone who had accepted that certain doors would never open again. Reports suggest Kanye began reframing his own story. Instead of seeing himself as pushed away, he started presenting himself as someone who walked away. This reframing mattered. It allowed him to reclaim agency in a situation where he felt stripped of it. Commentators believe this is why his words became sharper and less filtered. He no longer felt the need to protect relationships he believed were already gone. At the same time, Jay's public posture remained unchanged, composed, controlled, distant. Fans are shocked by how little he addressed the situation directly. Analysts argue that this silence reinforced the idea that the relationship had shifted from personal to purely historical. What once mattered emotionally was now being archived professionally. This contrast fueled the most dramatic interpretations. Some fans believe the silence was strategic, others believe it was emotional detachment. Either way, the lack of clarity created space for the idea that an unspoken boundary had been crossed and could not be repaired. Commentators say this is where the so-called ultimatum theory gained traction, not as a confirmed event, but as a way to explain behavior that otherwise felt confusing. The theory suggests that when Kanye refused to soften, to quiet down, to stay within expected limits, the response was withdrawal rather than confrontation. No public condemnation, no dramatic fallout, just removal of access.
Fans analyzing this period point to moments where Kanye appears to speak directly to people who are not responding, interviews where he addresses absence more than presence, statements where he expresses frustration at being abandoned during vulnerable moments. Commentators argue these were not random expressions, they were reactions to a silence that felt louder than words. There are also claims that this separation affected how Kanye was treated by the broader industry. Support structures weakened, patience thinned, tolerance shifted into caution. Analysts are careful to note that correlation is not confirmation, but fans are struck by how timing aligns. Once certain relationships cooled, so did the safety net. Kanye, according to these discussions, responded by leaning further into independence. He stopped seeking validation from traditional spaces. He challenged systems openly. He spoke without concern for consequence. And while this approach energized some fans, it alarmed others who believed he was burning bridges he might later need. Commentators say this was not a breakdown, but a transformation. Kanye was no longer trying to be understood by the same people. He was speaking past them, and that choice came with isolation as well as freedom. Fans are divided on whether this stage represents strength or loss. Some see it as an artist finally refusing to be controlled. Others see it as someone cutting himself off from stabilizing influences. Both interpretations coexist, and that tension is what keeps the conversation alive. According to reports, this period also marked the final emotional closure. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but acceptance. Acceptance that whatever bond once existed could not survive the evolution of both men, one built on navigating power structures, the other driven to challenge them. The most striking part for fans is how quiet the ending was. No dramatic announcement, no official statement, just time passing and paths diverging. Commentators argue that this quiet ending is what makes the story feel unfinished. Unanswered questions linger because no one ever addressed them directly. Was the distance intentional or inevitable? Was guidance mistaken for control?
Was independence misread as instability? These questions remain unresolved, and perhaps that is why the narrative continues to evolve. As fans revisit old moments, lyrics, and interviews, they see a story that feels less like a feud and more like a collision of values. Two visions of success moving in opposite directions, two definitions of loyalty that could not coexist. According to the commentary dominating conversations now, this final stage wasn't about choosing sides, it was about choosing paths. Kanye chose unpredictability and honesty, regardless of cost. The other side chose stability and silence, regardless of perception. And in the end, what shocks fans most is not that the relationship ended, but that it ended without explanation, leaving behind speculation, reinterpretation, and a legacy that now feels far more complicated than it ever did in real time. This unresolved ending is what keeps the story alive today, not because anyone has proven what happened, but because the absence of answers invites endless interpretation. And as long as fans continue asking why, the idea of a hidden turning point will continue to feel real, even without confirmation. Now that you've heard how these reports and commentaries are laying everything out, the real question is how you see it. After revisiting all these moments, the silences, the emotional shifts, and the way the relationship slowly unraveled, do you think this was simply two powerful figures growing in different directions, or does it really feel like something deeper was happening behind the scenes? Fans are still shocked because nothing about this story feels clean or fully explained, and the lack of clear answers is what keeps the debate alive. Some people believe Kanye was right to push back and protect his voice, even if it meant standing alone. Others feel that refusing guidance in an industry built on strategy comes with consequences that can't be avoided. And then there are those who think both sides played their part in a situation that spiraled quietly instead of exploding publicly. No matter where you stand, it's clear that this story has left hip-hop fans divided and questioning everything they thought they knew. This isn't about proving what happened, it's about understanding why so many people are talking about it now and why these narratives keep resurfacing years later. Emotions ran high, loyalty was questioned, and what once looked like brotherhood now feels layered with tension and unanswered questions, and that's exactly why your perspective matters here. So now it's your turn. Do you think Kanye was being controlled, or do you believe he pushed away the very people trying to protect him? Was silence a power move, or was it simply the only way to avoid more damage? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let everyone know which side of this story you're leaning toward. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into the stories fans can't stop talking about, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who still argues about this era of hip-hop, because this conversation is far from over. And don't forget, the next story might change everything you think you know all over again.